the Federal Reserve decision yesterday holding rates 10-2. We had two dissenters, Chris Waller, Stephen Moran. They wanted a 25 basis point cut. They held rates in place. So your Fed funds rate is still at its range of 3.5 to 3.75%. So, and Jerome Powell, very interesting press conference where he tried to stay away from the politics. What else is going on in the United States? The U.S. dollar, biggest one-day drop on Tuesday since Liberation Day in 2025. Donald Trump saying, it's fine if the dollar is weak. And that led to it falling further. And then Scott Bessent coming out and saying, no. We actually want a strong dollar. So interesting developments there. I have to see what the impact is on emerging markets as the dollar gets weaker. We've got an analyst here, Damien Lowe, CIO of Ericsson's Capital, saying essentially that Bessent is being ambiguous with his comments and that he might say he wants a strong dollar, but they feel that they want he feels that the U.S., that is Trump administration, wants a gradual weakening of the dollar. Isn't there a double-edged sword there? Let's get to the land of the black stars. Okay, well, before we get to that, gold prices, of course, look at that, above 5,500, silver at 119. Wasn't this 2,500 to begin January? And this is about, what, $35 to begin January of 2025. Just incredible appreciation. And so it looks like Ghana is benefiting from this. They had a rate decision. We're going to get a number of central bank decisions on the African continent now. Ghana cutting rates by 250 basis points to 15.5 from 18%. And this is a 4-year low. We also had inflation falling to 5.4% in December. Look at that. Look where it was in December of 2022, 54 point. We just basically moved a decimal over there. Let's talk to Arnold Dublin-Green, who's the MD, CEO of RC Asset Management. Arnold, it's good to see you again. I was saying Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
You're welcome. So
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you, man. So let's start with the rate cuts over in Ghana. We had some a range of estimates. I mean, some economists thinking, 200 basis point cuts. We got 250. Were you surprised? I mean, what did you expect?
Not necessarily surprised. I mean, you showed the data there earlier, so I can even take a closer or a nearer data.
Yeah.
December 2024 inflation was at 23.8%. A year later, 5.4%. Currency appreciated by 40% last year. It just makes sense for them to now to start looking at growth, right? So the central bank's looking at credit growth and looking at other aspects, sort of consolidating the win.
Okay, great stuff. Yeah. So now with respect to the outlook for the monetary policy path in Ghana, do you expect more rate cuts?
Sure, yeah, why not? I mean, like I mentioned, it's consolidating the win, right? So now it's credit growth. Now it's just basically credit growth and trying to grow the economy through a lower interest rate environment. So yeah, definitely, especially if inflation continues to cool or the disinflationary environment continues to go in.
Now, if with that dramatic deceleration from 54.1% December 2022 all the way to 5.4% of 2025. You mentioned what it was in 2024.
Yeah.
What have you made of that trajectory of inflation in Ghana?
So it's positive, right?
Yeah.
It's massively positive. And it's welcome, it's needed. Ghana went through what Ghana went through, the huge default, inflation going through the roof. The default was crazy. And then obviously the IMF getting brought in with the IMF framework. So this is massively welcome and it's expected. Obviously, gold has been a central pillar, and they've played the gold trade very, very well.
Yeah.
The Gold Coast has played the gold trade very well. So it's welcome. It's definitely welcome.
Fine. Let's get into that because like a lot of folks are. I mean, we had the Mahama coming in again.
Yeah.
They've credited his policies and so on. And while someone say, look, his policies are great, he's on the right path, but he has benefited from a wave of gold. So, what with can we credit gold as the main reason for the turnaround? Because there are FX reserves, balance of payments, CD appreciation.
Yeah.
Can you anchor what's the turnaround to gold? It's a gold. Ghana is a gold story. I mean, I don't get your thoughts.
Ghana is a gold story. Ghana is a central pillar. But I mean, obviously, you also have to also credit the decision makers to take advantage of gold.
Yeah.
Right. So, and what they did was incredible. We saw central banks around the world take the gold reserves up to 20-25%. Ghana took the gold reserves up to 40%.
Wow.
Right. Exactly. So they definitely took advantage of that. And like you said, the maths was mathing, right? So trade balance went from 3.6 billion to more than double last year. And to put that in perspective, the IMF expected the trade balance to come up at 3.7 billion or so by the end of this year. You're looking at probably an $8 billion trade balance.
Yeah.
FX reserves of $14 billion, whereas the IMF review is expecting $8 billion by now. So yeah, the policy makers and the decision makers decided to take advantage of the fact that Ghana is a gold producers and they can buy gold in cedis and then store it, or rather market in dollars on their reserves. So you have to also credit the policy makers for making that decision of taking advantage of gold, because not every country is doing this. Right? Some countries have gold and they're not taking advantage of the gold. Of the gold rally, or they didn't see the gold rally as early as the Ghanaian policymakers did. So yeah, definitely gold is a central pillar, but also the decision makers that need to take some credit.
Speaking of decision makers, so talk to us about this them selling into, taking advantage of the rally and selling into. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, so there are two schools of thoughts, right? So the IMF was never pleased that the central bank was stockpiling gold.
Yeah.
The IMF view was, if you mark to market your gold, so generally central banks, when they buy gold, they don't necessarily mark to markets.
Yeah.
They keep it at cost. If you mark to market your gold, when gold price is correct or fall, the shock would be intense.
Yeah.
So the IMF had been, let's use the word, urging or advising the central bank to sell gold. But from the central bank governor's perspective, they had their gold, the FX reserves, 40%. The FX reserves was made up of 40% gold. They had to reduce to sort of a global average or global standard of 20-25%. So one can say they needed to diversify, because having too much of your assets in one, having too much of your investments in one asset class can be dangerous and too exposed to shock. So they had to diversify. They had to sell. They sold about 20 tons, more than half of the gold holdings in December.
Wow.
Which one can say is a brilliant trade, right? Gold is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
You buy low, sell high. But it's something that I support and I commend the central bank governor for doing.
Now, let's now focus on precious metals themselves. I know copper is also going wild as well. But just what have you made of this ink? I mean, I didn't think it was still going to just... with what's going on around the world.
Yeah.
I just want to ask your thoughts on where gold and silver are now. Your take on the rally in precious metals.
Yeah, so the gold trade started as a structural shift trade, right? So there's been this whole rhetoric of de-dollarization going on around the world, and this started in 2022 when Russia-Ukraine war started, and then the whole world saw the way the US sanctioned Russian assets, especially the Russian central bank reserve assets. So everyone thought to themselves, oh my goodness, we need to make sure we are okay. And obviously there's a whole BRICS movement coming, where there's a BRICS single payment system coming made up of 40-60% of gold and then the other, the balance of the BRICS currency. So you're seeing countries on a level, central banks buying gold at an astronomical level. But what's really interesting, you're also seeing new buyers come in, right? To give an example, China in November had an increase in VAT in an asset class that caused investors to pile into gold, about $4 billion worth of investors in November from China. Japan, that's coming from decades of no inflation, is now seeing inflation at 3%. So now you have Japanese investors starting to look for inflation hedge.
Yeah.
So where you have global central banks buying gold at a steady price or steady rates, because central banks are not price sensitive, so regardless they'll buy gold. You're seeing new investors and new buyers come in. You're also seeing the crypto boys starting to buy gold, right? Tether and the rest starting to now buy gold. So this new, gold was steady 2022, steady growth, steady, so sort of a straight line from 2022 to 2025. But now the new buyers are coming in as of Q3 and Q4 2025 to now. So I guess the only worry is what happens when there are no more buyers.
Right.
And that's what's keeps me up at night, right? But this is what's happening in gold.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks for the breakdown. So, taking it back to Ghana, does that make Ghanaian assets more attractive? I mean, the stock market did what, 70-something% last year? Yeah, stocks, bonds, just does that, with this rally, does...
Yeah, it does. If the CD stays stable, which I don't see a reason why it doesn't, and now with the central bank cuts into inflation in single digits, inflation sort of below their inflation target, which is positive, and central bank rates being where they are, monetary policy rates rather being where they are. It's more attractive because you're going to see credit growth. Credit growth leads to an increase in consumers, so the consumer story gets stronger, right? Credit growth also means the business environment is the business leaders and CEOs and boards are more confident in spending, so you're going to be looking at employment growth. So you're going to start seeing, like I mentioned earlier, consolidation in the environment. So the macro story now it stays strong and it gets strong and it gets more stable. So as an investor from the outside looking in, especially if you're coming from a weak dollar environment, so there's a good carry trade there for you, where you're seeing a strengthening CD or a stable CD, improved consumer environments, and improved credit growth, improved business environment. So yes, definitely, it's a good trade.
Great stuff, Aaron. I got to get you over to the United States. Got a couple minutes. Maybe split 1 minute each for each. Let me start with the dollar. You just mentioned the weaker dollar. Now, Trump coming out Tuesday saying, "Oh, it's okay if we have a weak dollar." It plunges, and then Besset comes out and says, "No, one is strong dollar." Well, what's your take on? I guess with the emerging markets, benefit from a weaker dollar. What's your take on what's happening with dollar?
So weaker dollar emerging markets benefits. Unfortunately, our currencies are priced in dollar. If you know what I mean, right? So anything that's priced in dollar goes up when the dollar's weak. It also means that our external borrowing costs go down. So Eurobonds or any bilateral loans gets cheaper for all the EM countries. It makes local currency investments more attractive, right? So to outside investors. So foreign portfolio investors will now see Naira bonds as more attractive than they did before. We'll now see Ghanaian bonds more attractive than they did before. So yes, it's very positive for us.
Now, the Fed finally, they held rates yesterday. There were only 2 dissenters. What was your reaction, and I guess how you see the U.S. monetary policy moving further this year? How do you see things working out?
I mean, first of all, it's expected. Dollar's weaker or cheaper, if you want to put it that way. Dollar's weaker. Q3 US GDP growth 4.4% versus G20 countries of 0.7%. Euro 0.2%. The dollar is the American economy is relatively stronger than the rest of the world, or most of the world, right? Inflation is only 1 basis point higher than the inflation target. There was no need for cuts from the Fed's perspective. Obviously, from a political perspective, US, there's no credit growth. Mortgage rates are too high. So from a political perspective, as a politician, you want mortgage rates to be lower. You want credit growth because you want to be voted in. But from the Fed's perspective, everything is fine and the country's growing as it should be. And inflation is not a problem.
Great stuff. Sorry, I'll tell you that was my last question. Just to round up with Ghana, what's your outlook for Ghana's economy? I guess based on everything we've looked at for Ghana.
Yeah, more of the same. If everything is going the way it is, more of the same. You just have to watch out for CD stability, perhaps watch out for anything in food inflation just acting a bit strange, because obviously there's still structural issues and infrastructure issues that can affect things like food inflation. So just watch out for those. But for me, Ghana has had a wonderful, good 2024, wonderful 2025, and there's no need for, there's no doubt that it will have a great 2026.
Arnold Dublin-Green, MD CEO, RC Asset Management Ltd. Thank you so much for taking us around the world. Really informative discussion. Appreciate your time. I'm glad to have you back. Thank you so much.